Broncos country, welcome to the Week 7 recap for the Denver Broncos hosting the New York Giants. Now, this was a pretty crazy game, right? I was at the game, and the first three quarters, I was just baking in the sun. You might be able to see the sunburn on my face, but that fourth quarter, man, that was electric, and that was a super fun experience to be at live. So yeah, let's go ahead. Let's jump straight into this recap. Not going to be a studs and duds video because I feel like this week everyone could be on the studs and everyone could be on the duds this week. So I'm just going to give you maybe a more traditional recap. If you do enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel down below, as the support is greatly appreciated. Let's go ahead and let's jump straight in to the recap for the Denver Broncos Week 7 victory over the New York Giants. So starting off, let's look at the box score, and this was a very special game for the Broncos going in. Everyone knew it, right? Demaryius Thomas, DT, he was being inducted into the Ring of Fame for the Denver Broncos, as well as honoring the Super Bowl 50 team, and they honored Ronnie Hillman as well, who passed away too young, who was a part of that Super Bowl 50 team. But taking a look at the box score, I mean, it is kind of just crazy to think about. Now, you won't see the breakdown of the scoring of each quarter, but it is crazy how we scored 33 points in one quarter of play. So that's just absolutely insane. But you can see the total yards being 407, 265 passing, 142 rushing, averaging 5.4 per play. You can see the first down, the third down efficiency, the fourth down efficiency, the total plays ran. It was just an insane game. You know, we'll talk about the penalties later because, you know, some penalties maybe deserved, some weren't maybe deserved, but the discipline, the penalties need to come down for the Broncos because we are one of the most penalized teams in the entirety of the NFL. But yeah, that is a box score. Just a quick look at what happened. I'm going to go and try and break things down a little bit further in terms of the players. Starting off with our quarterback in Bo Nix, who went 27 for 50 for 279 yards, 54% completion percentage, and also had 5 carries on the ground for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. In that fourth quarter, Bo went off, right? Had the 2 rushing touchdowns. There was the one where he scrambled to the right side of the end zone, and then there was the designed run where he rolled out to the left and was able to take it in for the touchdown to take the lead at that point. But yeah, Bo Nix, I thought he played really, really solid. Was he excellent in the first 3 quarters? No. But I've seen a lot of people on the media and the experts online say that Bo Nix played bad, and I really don't think he played horrible in those first 3 quarters. Did he play his best football? No, but I don't think the play calling that he was getting in the first 3 quarters helped him, especially in the first half. There was a lot of drops happening by the Broncos. So I don't think he played bad, but I don't necessarily think it was his fault through the first 3 quarters. I saw this insane take by someone who I think works at PFF, and I don't really use PFF because it's not my thing. I think sometimes the grades and stuff that happens, I don't think it's really accurate a whole lot of times in terms of their rankings, right? So I'm not a big user and believer in PFF. If you are, no offense to you, but personally for me, I'm not a big PFF guy. But I saw someone who I believe works there say that if they took Spencer Rattler and dropped him into the Broncos offense, we would have more success. And that is just an insane take to me. That is absolutely insane. I don't know what they're on about. But Bo Nix in that fourth quarter, right, obviously had the 4 touchdowns, 2 on the ground, one a passing touchdown to RJ Harvey, and the other passing touchdown was a deflection to Troy Franklin. But yeah, Bo Nix really turned it on in that fourth quarter. Don't think he played horrible in the first 3 quarters, but I do think he could have played a little bit better. Then moving on to the rushing attack on the ground, J.K. Dobbins actually had a really solid game and really came alive in that at the end of the third quarter, which led to our first scoring drive, which occurred in the fourth quarter. He had 14 carries for 81 yards, averaging 5.8 a carry. No touchdown, but he had a solid day on the ground, and I don't think I've seen a lot of people talk a whole lot about how much of a good day J.K. Dobbins had. Then, of course, we just talked about Bo Nix with the 5 carries for 48 yards and the 2 touchdowns on the ground. Marvin Mims had 1 carry for 13 yards, and then RJ Harvey had 4 carries, but he did not get a single yard on any of those carries. Then we move on to the rushing, or not the rushing, but more of the receivers, right? Cortland Sutton didn't have a touchdown, but he came up big throughout this entire game, right? Six receptions on 10 targets for 87 yards, averaging 14.5 per reception. No touchdowns, like I said, but he made some big catches, especially his first target of the game. He had one that he dropped. It was a tough catch, right? It was a contested catch, but that's one you expect Cortland Sutton to make. But he had some big catches throughout the game. The biggest one being when it was 33 seconds on that final drive after the Marvin Mims big reception. Cortland Sutton had a big catch down the sideline, made the catch, got up, was able to run it to midfield, so the Broncos were able to clock it and kick the game-winning field goal with 2 seconds remaining. So Cortland Sutton had some big time catches. None of them resulted in a score, but they helped the Broncos get into position to score touchdowns. So Cortland Sutton had a fantastic day, as well as Marvin Mims, who I just mentioned. He was all over the field, right? 6 receptions on 7 targets, 85 yards, averaged 14.2 per reception. No touchdown, like I said, had the one carry, as we mentioned earlier, but he had that big reception to set us up on that final drive, right? That got us to midfield, right? Was able to give the ball to the ref, clock it. That also caused Brian Burns to be offside to get the additional 5 yards and move us into plus territory to help Will Lutz get into even better field goal range for that game-winning chip shot field goal. And Marvin Mims, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he might have been one of the very few players that didn't have a drop in this game, right? Cortland Sutton dropped a pass early. Pat Bryant dropped a pass early. Nate Atkins dropped a pass, and it's funny because he made 2 big receptions, and I said at the game, oh, Nate Atkins is the only one who can catch for us. And then the following play, he had the reception not a reception, but he had a drop pass that went through his hands. Troy Franklin had a big drop on the visitor sideline. There was just a lot of players who dropped the ball, and Marvin Mims might have been one of the few players that didn't drop the ball. I can't say that for 100% certainty, but off the top of my head, I don't think Marvin Mims dropped the ball. And he came up big, and he made some big clutch catches, right? The one I mentioned on that final drive that got us to midfield, mentioned that one, but I also think when the Broncos we were driving for that final touchdown, right? I think it was 26-23, and we were driving for that touchdown. We run a screen, and then we want to run another pass play that falls incomplete, and it was 3rd and 11. And then Marvin Mims comes up big with that big catch to move the chains, to get us the first down, get us that chunk play. So we were set up in position to score that final touchdown. Marvin Mims had an excellent game for the Broncos. And then you move on to Evan Ingram. He also had a drop, but to be fair, that pass from Bo Nix was pretty low, but he had 5 receptions on 8 targets, 42 yards, average 8.4 per reception. No touchdown again, but he had that big reception right before the 2-minute warning where he was able to pick up more than the first down. Didn't go out of bounds because obviously the 2-minute warning's there. As soon as you go down, the clock is going to stop for the 2-minute warning. Was able to stay in bounds and pick up extra yardage to get us closer for eventually that Bo Nix, rolled out run for the touchdown. So Evan Ingram had a fantastic game. Right, I like how we're utilizing him more and more each week. I wish we would get him more involved on some of the plays where we're throwing to Adam Troutman or Nate Atkins. I wish he would be the primary receiver when we're getting these designed tight end passes. I know he's not necessarily going to put his hand in the dirt. That's not going to fool anyone. Although he did have some blocks in this game, right? He did line up, and he was helping I think it was Mike McGlinchey towards the end of the game. When he kept coming back from his injury, he did help set up some blocks, whether that's a chip or fully helping blocking an edge rusher. But I would like to see Evan Ingram continue to get more involved in this offense. Then you have the defense, and there was a lot of players who kept making plays. I think I wanted to talk about the defense because they held strong, but there were some drives where they bent and then broke, right? I think that first touchdown that Jackson Dart threw, wide open tight end. We'll see what happens. Or what I want to say is, from my stance in the seat, and I could be wrong, I thought there was a pretty obvious hold that allowed Jackson Dart to find time to find the touchdown. But I do want to say that you can't rely on flags, you can't rely on penalties, and at the end of the day, you have to cover that guy. You can't let him get open, even if you think there's going to be a flag. You can't rely on a flag. You can't rely on any of that. Big breakdown in the Broncos coverage to allow that touchdown. Then another touchdown, obviously, the Giants were driving down the field, and you allow a pass to Scatabo for a touchdown in that game. And then there were some other touchdowns, right? The Jackson Dart one at the end of the game, quarterback sneak. You just, 4th and 19, you can't allow him to convert that. And there was 2 opportunities on the play before of dropped interceptions because our players ran into each other. Surtain, and I can't remember who the other one was, ran into each other on the sideline. And then Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga ran and collided into each other. And Brandon Jones actually left the game, and PJ Locke came in. So I'm hoping Brandon Jones is going to be fine for this upcoming game, because him being out with an injury is going to be a big loss for us. But they collided and they dropped the interception, and both of those would have sealed the game. Wouldn't have to drive down for the field goal, and you could have just need the ball down and run the clock out. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and then the Giants go down and score on that Jackson Dart quarterback sneak. And I think the other one, or the other 2 touchdowns that happened, was the unfortunate double deflection right after we got the double deflection touchdown. The Giants got one, and Theo Johnson scored. And then there was an unfortunate run where Tyrone Tracy just ran up the middle of the field untouched for a touchdown. So the defense, there were some very bright plays. The end of the game, they locked down, they were efficient, they were super effective, and they played really well. And then there were some drives where it's like, what are we doing? Leaving the tight end wide open, not even touching Tyrone Tracy on a run up the middle of the field. There was just some defensive miscues, so I thought they played well, but I think there was a lot of stuff to clean up on this defense as well. But overall, they locked down honestly, the Giants scored a lot of points on this defense. I'm going to give them a shout out because I like this defense. I think we did really, really well, but I think obviously there's some stuff to work on. They didn't play their best game of the season at all, but we're able to come out with the win. Of course, you can see I think we got 4 sacks on Jackson Dart. Looking at this, I believe it was 4 sacks, right? Q Robinson, he got a half a sack. Not quite his first sack yet, but he does have half a sack. Dondre Tillman got one. Malcolm Roach had half a sack, right? Jonathan Cooper got to Jackson Dart for 1.5 sacks, right? So overall, great game by the defense, but there are some things to clean up. And honestly, that should be expected when you only score 33 points in the 4th quarter. Here are some of my concerns about the game, though. The early play call by Sean Payton, I think that needs to change. We ran way too many screens while not trying to establish the run. And I think we need to unleash Bo Nix earlier. And what I mean by that, it's not deep shot after deep shot after deep shot every play. Yeah, those are nice. But I want us to throw those medium passes, like those intermediate ranges that are going to go right at the first down marker, maybe a little bit beyond that 10 to 15 range. I want Bo Nix to throw and complete passes there more often because we've seen how effective he has been in the late game when we're scrambling and we need to go down and drive the football. Trust Bo Nix to make the right throw and trust those passes, not just in the final minute or the final quarter of the game, but throughout the entire game. And if you do that while establishing the run, sorry for hitting the microphone, do that while establishing the run, while also mixing in some screen passes, because I know how much Sean Payton likes screen passes, mixing those in as well. The screens are going to be more effective while having an overall more effective offense. So I do think the early play calling from Sean Payton needs to change. Second thing is catching. Here in practice this week, I think the Broncos need to go out and they need to work on just catching the football, because early in the game it was drop pass after drop pass after drop pass after drop pass. So the catching needs to put an emphasis on that. This game was very concerning with the amount of drops that the Broncos receivers had. So that's something that needs to be worked on in practice, in my opinion. And then the third and final thing is the discipline in terms of the penalties. 12 penalties for 127 yards is just unacceptable. Need to clean up the penalties. Now, I will say, I think the PI on Riley Moss wasn't a great call. Riley Moss is turning around and making a play for the ball. Don't think that's pass interference at all. The roughing call, you could argue. There are some calls that you could argue. I thought the overall how the refs were playing and calling the game was really weird for both sides of the ball. They didn't really call holding, even though there was a lot of holding by both teams, and there were a lot of false starts by both teams that went uncalled. So, very weird game by the refs. I don't think they officiated the game well at all. But for the Broncos, there are some penalties that do need to be addressed and taken care of, right? You can't have a lot of these penalties, right? I believe it was an illegal shift by Troy Franklin and Bo Nix. Both of them need to get better. Troy needs to get set, and then Bo needs to check that Troy is set because there was that illegal shift, which resulted in a false start, which had a 10-second runoff for the Broncos in the first half. So a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned up, but the Broncos at the end of the day, they got the win 33-32 over the New York Giants. Those are my thoughts. That's my recap. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel down below if you did enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Parker, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.